If you've ever done long-haul trucking, you know how heavy the tiredness gets at 2 a.m. You'll pull into almost any dark lay-by just to shut your eyes for 20 minutes. But if you're ever on the A9, keep driving. A few months ago, I made the mistake of pulling over at the Highway 9 rest stop. 10 minutes later, something outside was systematically hammering against my trailer doors with enough force to bend the steel hinges before moving right up to my cab window. I'm only sharing this because another driver messaged me last week about the exact same spot. He got out before it was too late. I wasn't that lucky. The driver who messaged me was Stu Bramley. He runs fridges out of Doncaster and has been on the road even longer than me. His message was just 3 words: that A9 lay-by. I knew exactly which one he meant. I didn't even have to ask. He called me properly last Thursday, which he never does. He said he'd pulled into that same lay-by about 2 months ago around 1 a.m. The first thing he noticed was the metal bin at the edge of the gravel. He'd passed it dozens of times over the years, and that bin was always knocked over on its side, every single time. But that night, someone had stood it back up. Stu said it gave him a terrible feeling, and he just put the truck back in gear and left before he found out why. Hearing that is what made me decide to type this out. This happened a few months back. The run started out completely normal. I picked up a mixed pallet load from a distribution center just outside Harrogate at around 10:15 in the evening. I had a 40-foot trailer and a delivery window in Newcastle for 6 a.m. I've done this specific route probably 80 times. I knew every junction and every speed camera by heart. Right before I pulled out of the yard, I was on the phone with my wife, Karen. She was annoyed with me for taking another overnight shift because I'd just done a double run the day before, Wakefield to Bristol and back, with maybe 4 hours of sleep before going straight back out. She told me I was pushing it. I told her I'd be fine and that I'd pull over if I got tired. She just said, "You always say that." By the time I passed Boroughbridge, the radio cut out. It didn't fade, it just went completely dead mid-song. I switched it over to AM, but it was nothing but heavy static, so I just turned it off. After you pass the B Road junction outside Skelton-on-Ure, the street lights stop entirely. It's just pitch-black fields on both sides. I was exhausted. It was that heavy kind of tiredness where your eyes start crossing and you have to force yourself to blink. I knew I needed to stop for 20 minutes just to clear my head. The lay-by comes up on the left without much warning. It's barely a rest stop, just a gravel pull-off, a rotting wooden picnic bench, and that metal bin. No lights, no cameras, nothing. I'd stopped there maybe twice before during the day, but nothing memorable. I pulled in just after midnight. I was the only vehicle there. I left the engine idling to keep the heater running, leaned the seat back, and closed my eyes. I was right on the verge of falling asleep when I noticed how quiet it was. Usually when you park up in the countryside, you hear something. Insects, wind, or distant traffic from the motorway. Here, there was absolutely nothing. Then I noticed the trees at the edge of the gravel. The branches were swaying violently, but there wasn't a breath of wind hitting my cab. The air around the truck was completely dead. I sat up and watched the trees through the windscreen, trying to make sense of it, but I figured I was just overtired. I shut my eyes again. About 10 minutes later, I heard the first thud. It was a heavy metallic sound against the back of the cab. It wasn't a small vibration. Something with real weight had hit the metal. I felt it come right up through the seat. I sat up immediately and checked both mirrors. There was nothing out there. Then it happened again. Same spot, same force. And then it started moving. Something began tapping along the side of the trailer, moving slowly toward the cab. Tap, tap, tap. It sounded like someone walking alongside the rig, dragging a heavy hand or an object against the metal panel. My truck has a four-way camera system, so I flicked the dash screen on and switched to the rear feed. There was no one back there, but the air looked wrong. I don't know how else to describe it. It wasn't a shadow or a figure, but the air itself looked distorted, like looking through thick old window glass where everything behind it gets warped. And that distortion was moving along the side of the trailer at the exact same pace as the tapping. Then the noise stopped. I sat there for about 20 seconds in dead silence. I actually let out a breath, thinking whatever it was had gone. Then the hammering started. The entire rig shook. This wasn't a knock. It was a violent, sustained pounding against the rear doors. It was so heavy that I could hear the steel hinges straining and groaning from inside the cab. I could feel the vibrations through the floorboards. I panicked and hit the ignition button. Nothing happened. The dashboard flickered, and a check engine warning light came on, which made no sense because the truck had been running perfectly fine a minute ago. I hit the button again. The display went completely dark, then came back on with half the digital gauges missing. The pounding started moving around the truck. It went from the rear doors to the near side panel to the off side. It felt systematic, like something was circling the vehicle and testing every single square inch of the metal, looking for a way in. My coffee flask rolled off the passenger seat and hit the floor, but I didn't even look down. I looked back at the camera monitor. The distortion was right outside my driver's side door now. It wasn't moving anymore. It was just standing there. A terrible feeling hit me. It wasn't standard panic. It was the sudden, sickening realization that whatever this thing was, it had known I was inside the cab from the moment I pulled into the layby. It had just been taking its time getting to me. I looked away from the screen, closed my eyes and hit the ignition one more time. The engine roared to life. I didn't even bother checking my mirrors. I threw it into gear and slammed on the accelerator. I clipped the edge of the old picnic bench as I swung out, felt the trailer bounce hard, and tore back onto the pitch-black road. The second the truck cleared the gravel and hit the main tarmac, the hammering stopped instantly. It didn't fade out as I drove away. It just cut off like a light switch. The shaking stopped, and the road went completely normal again. I drove 22 miles straight to the Scotch Corner services without once touching the brakes. I parked right under the brightest floodlight on the forecourt. There was another lorry parked opposite me with its curtains drawn and the driver asleep. Seeing someone just having a normal night made me feel completely disconnected from reality. I thought about going over and knocking on his cab just to talk to a human being, but I didn't. What would I even say? I called my wife at 2:30 in the morning. She answered right away, terrified by the sound of my voice. I didn't tell her what happened. I just told her I was fine and that I'd see her in the morning. She didn't hang up, and we just stayed on the line together in silence while I sat there until 4 a.m. Then I drove the rest of the way to the depot in Newcastle. When I got there, before I could even log my paperwork, one of the yard lads walked round to the back of my trailer and called me over. 3 of the 4 heavy steel hinges on the rear doors were bent completely outward. The metal plating along the side panel was heavily dented across a 6-foot stretch, and the steel had actually split open in 2 places. The depot manager came out, walked the length of the trailer without saying a word, and asked me what the hell I had hit. I just told him I didn't know, and that it must have been shifting road debris. I logged it on the insurance form, signed it, and left it at that. I've only told 4 other drivers about this since it happened. 2 of them just nodded and didn't say a word, which was an answer in itself. Another driver I told was a woman named Trish. She's been driving longer than any of us. The moment I mentioned the A9, she set her mug down before I even got to the part about the rest stop. She told me she had pulled into that layby once during the middle of the afternoon just to stretch her legs. She stood outside her cab for maybe 30 seconds before she got a feeling that she wasn't alone. She said it wasn't like seeing a physical person, but more like walking into a house and instantly knowing someone is standing right around the corner watching you. She said she felt like whatever was there was sizing her up, trying to work something out. She got straight back in her truck and never used that road again. I still have the dash cam footage downloaded on my laptop. I've watched it dozens of times. You can see the strange distortion moving along the side of the trailer, stopping at the cab door, and then the truck abruptly speeding away. I've shown it to 3 close friends. Not one of them has ever had an explanation for it. But the thing that keeps me awake at night isn't the damage to the trailer or the footage. It's the driver's side window. When I first parked up to get some sleep, I had cracked the window open about an inch to let some fresh air in. I didn't roll it back up until the heavy hammering started. That means for about 5 or 6 minutes. While that thing was walking up the side of my trailer and standing right outside my door, my window was open. I don't know if an inch is enough for whatever that was, but whenever I start thinking about those 6 minutes, my mind completely blanks out and I have to force myself to stop thinking about it.